What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special. And as the second largest property developer in China, China Evergrande inches closer and closer to bankruptcy. There's been some interesting developments over the last few days, and I wanted to cover those because it's getting very little attention in the mainstream press. Before we do that, I did get this comment on my channel the other day saying that they missed my intro music and that it got them pumped up. Well, I haven't been doing as much video editing lately because I've been trying to focus on putting out more content versus trying to edit, my stuttering and everything else out of the videos. But since you asked, here's the intro music. You ready? Hit it. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jack Gamble, and I am Nobody Special. And I want to get into this Evergrande story because it really is not getting the mainstream media coverage that it deserves. This has the potential to cause a global liquidity crisis, and I don't think that's hyperbolic to say that. Evergrande is a huge company, and it is only one company out of thousands in China that could be on the brink of failure right now. And to think that something like that going on in the world's second largest economy couldn't spread over here in the United States or into Europe, I don't think that's so certain. Now, I wanted to get into some things that I found on Twitter and some other interesting details about the story and recent developments. But before I do this, I have to ask, please, guys, smash that big, beautiful, transitory like button. Subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification bell. It would really help my channel to keep growing. It helps me out, and I would be forever in your debt. Now that that's done, let's shrink my big, fat melon of a head. And let's get into some of this information. I am going to put me down here. Now, here's something interesting I found in this article. Now, this is on the pn.org. I'm not really familiar with this particular source, but it's a Reuters article, and I've seen this from a couple of places. And there's one thing I wanted to point out in here. China's major banks have been notified by the housing authority that Evergrande Group won't be able to pay loan interest due September 20th, Bloomberg reported, underlying the broadening impact of property developers' liquidity crisis. Now, the reason I want to point this out is not that Evergrande is not making their interest payments. I don't think that surprises anyone. Evergrande is hopelessly indebted. Their cash flow is next to nothing. So I'm not surprised by that. But here's one detail that's being glossed over. China's major banks have been notified by the housing authority. Now, that's interesting, because Evergrande has not told the banks, we're not going to pay you the interest we owe you. The Chinese government is telling the Chinese banks, Evergrande is not going to pay you the interest that they owe. Why is the Chinese government acting as the spokesperson to the banks? Well, I guess there's a difference when the people that owe you money walk into your office and say, we can't pay you. Your reaction might be to get upset. It might be to make threats. It might be to initiate some kind of legal action. Who knows, right? But when representatives of the single most oppressive regime in the world, the most draconian government, arguably, that ever existed in the world, walks in and says, you're not getting paid, what are you going to say? Not much. So that's a big difference. So the government is not bailing out Evergrande here, but the government is not taking a laissez-faire approach here. They are getting involved, if not kind of subtly there. I didn't hear anybody point this out in any of the press, that it's the government telling the banks they're not going to get paid. I do see a lot of people covering this story, but everybody seems to be missing that detail, and that is a major detail. I mean, I'm telling you, when the guy that owes you money tells you he's not paying, that's different. When this big, nasty, violent, oppressive guy comes in and says you're not getting paid, okay, I'm not getting paid. Now, real quick, I want to just mention, right now the buzzards are circling Evergrande, right? Evergrande owes everybody money. They owe Chinese banks money. It's a good bet they owe American banks money. It's a good bet they owe American hedge funds, European hedge funds. They owe everybody money, okay? They're saying they've got $300 billion or $304 billion US in liabilities. That is a massive sum of money. All right, I know we live in the age of government trillions, but you need to understand, in terms of private business, that is a massive amount of money. Up until about 10 years ago, that was bigger than the market cap of every company on earth. Or of any company on earth, I should say, not every. So this is a huge quantity that they owe, and they owe everyone, which means counterparty risk is a problem because the people Evergrande doesn't pay, they probably owe money to somebody else. Well, if they can't pay, so you see how this whole derivative scheme starts to come unwound here. If everybody owes everybody, one guy doesn't pay, the dominoes start falling. But it's a good bet that the last ones paid, the people who are definitely going to get wiped out here, are non-Chinese companies. All right? When the Chinese government gets involved and starts deciding who's going to get paid and who isn't, U.S. hedge funds ain't on that list. U.S. banks sure as heck are not on that list. Same goes for Europeans. Moving on. There's some things I wanted to talk about here in Twitter that had come up recently, so I am going to bring this up. Real quick, I want to show some of these videos. These are protesters.
Investors have already been protesting.
Here, let me turn the volume down here. These are videos of protests at Evergrande's headquarters. All right, and I want you to keep in mind, protesting in China is not a decision that people enter into lightly. In China, when you demonstrate publicly, your name goes on a list. And if the government does not approve this message, you get a visit from the secret police. And you may even disappear. Or you may have hits on your social credit score, which makes it harder for you to buy a house, to borrow money. All right? So protesting in China is a big deal. It is not something people just do. Protesting in the United States is just this fashionable thing that people do every day. What are we protesting today? I don't know. I mean, go visit the college campus in Berkeley, UC Berkeley. Who knows what they're protesting? It's kind of fun. Just try to guess what they're protesting today. All right, in China, it's different because protesting involves a major personal risk on the part of the protester in China. So this many people showing up at Evergrande's office, that's a big deal. That means people are really pissed off. I just wanted to point that out. All right. The other thing I wanted to point, and this is where it got interesting. And this is a Twitter feed, The Last Bear Standing, and I've only been following this feed for a couple of weeks now since I started covering the Evergrande story. I don't know who this person is, but this feed is excellent. I highly recommend you follow The Last Bear Standing on Twitter because he has got some fantastic insights into China. And I want to cover this thread that he put up there today. And Last Bear Standing, thank you for this, whoever you are. And we're going to start a little bit down the line. He makes a couple of mentions of some previous Twitter threads that he's done. You can go back and check those out. They're all very good. But I'm going to start at number 5 here because there's some interesting info here. Consider this question seriously. How is it that Evergrande is insolvent? It has never reported a loss. Got to repeat that sentence. Evergrande has never reported a loss. Keep that in mind. Even in the first half of 2021, it showed a profit of 14.5 RMB. That's renminbi, basically the yuan. Even in the first half of 2021, they turned a profit on paper. It has current assets in excess of current liabilities in every period. So that's interesting. They've never taken a loss, and every quarterly or one-half statement, their assets exceed their liabilities. How could they possibly be bankrupt? Well, this dumb question is actually illuminating. You will never make a loss if you never acknowledge the expense of malinvestment, i.e., if you never write anything off, if you don't expense your losses, they show up as assets on your balance sheet, where as inventory. So what he's saying here is the reason why this company has never taken a loss is because they didn't sell any of their bad investments. They're just holding them on their books. Think about it like this. Say you bought a stock at $1,000 and it goes down to $1 in value. Well, if you never sell the $1,000 stock, you still have $1,000, right? No, not right. You don't still have $1,000. You have a $1 stock. But according to the way Evergrande keeps their books, when their assets go down in value, they don't take it off their balance sheet. They don't record the loss. They keep it as inventory. That is the problem there. And this is the sleeping giant of Chinese finance that is about to wake up and just smash everything, because Evergrande is not alone in this. I'm going to read on a little bit further. Evergrande has 1.4 trillion yuan, or $221 billion, as current inventory on its balance sheet as of June 30th, 2021, and yet has acknowledged it has been unsuccessful at monetizing any assets, including its own headquarters. How embarrassing. I want to repeat that too, because that bears repeating. It has been unsuccessful at monetizing any assets. So they're saying they have $221 billion of assets, but they can't sell any of it. So guess what? They have no assets. They have worthless junk. That's what they're holding. This problem is a lot bigger than even the press is covering. So they show up as assets on your balance sheet. Where? In inventory. Evergrande has reported $221 billion in inventory. Okay, we're going to move down here to number 8. Below is Evergrande's current assets and liabilities. Now this graph is very important. The yellow line shows current liability coverage. If it's below the 1.0x, or the green line, then there shouldn't be any liquidity issues. Above, the company needs to find a shortfall. All right, so let's look at this graph real quick. Let's move my big fat melon of a head. All right, so what you're looking at here, all right, the coverage is the liabilities over the assets, all right, but the important things here. Orange is your liabilities and blue is your assets. Now, look at this graph. Does this look like a distressed company to you? I mean, the blue line is assets and the orange one is liabilities. Using this graph, using Evergrande's own reported numbers, this company looks like it's thriving, doesn't it? But let's read on a little bit. This gets very interesting. All right, closing this out. Let's go to the next tweet from Last Bear Standing. Now I've repeated the same chart and scaling, but removing inventory from current assets, i.e. removing all of the homes and the buildings that they have in inventory that they can't sell, removing that from their assets. Now we look at the same graph and look at the difference. Now look at the difference between assets and liabilities. Now you can see why this company is going bankrupt. They're misreporting the value of what they have on their books. And now the reason I say this is because I've long said, and this is one reason why I do not touch Chinese investments with a 10-foot pole. You cannot trust any of the information that comes out of that country, because it is all filtered through Communist Party censors. And even this company, Evergrande, you have to understand, to reach a position of power within a company the size of China Evergrande, you must be connected to the Chinese Communist Party. You must be in their good graces. So even this information that's getting reported out, this is essentially CCP approved information. And it's garbage. It's worthless information. You can't trust any of the data. So when you take out their inventory, everything they have reported as inventory, which, I drew the comparison of the stock that's gone down in value. Well, real estate holdings act the same way, especially when you can't liquidate them, when you can't sell them. Now look at the imbalance between assets and liabilities. It's huge. It's in the hundreds of billions. And there's another reason I want to point out. Here, we can put this chart away for now. There's something else I want to point out about what's going on with the sale of the assets. And first of all, let me reiterate that what happened with Evergrande, that's happening with other companies. It's not in the news. But I mentioned in a video late last week that there had been something like 274 property developers of smaller size have gone bankrupt already this year, or defaulted on their debt already this year in China. That's one every day. All right, the whole Chinese real estate economy is imploding right now. And that's huge because most Chinese citizens have the bulk of their net worth in real estate. And it's very sad for the individual Chinese citizens. I mean, I am not a big fan of the Chinese Communist Party. All right, you can kind of tell by the way I talk in my videos that I place a lot of value in individual liberty and the right of people to determine their own destiny and make up their own decisions, right? So obviously, my beliefs don't fall in line with the Chinese Communist Party, but that does not mean I take any joy in seeing Chinese citizens get wiped out. I can feel for these people. I know what it's like to lose most of your net worth in a real estate transaction. I lost all the money I made commercial fishing on my first condo that I bought in 2006. All right, I had to work my butt off for that money. I mean, I literally, in some cases, worked my hands to the bone, and it went up in smoke when the real estate market collapsed here in the U.S. So I can feel for these people. I understand what they're going through. I've been through it myself, and it hurts. And it makes you angry. It makes you really mad that you see people who are still eating their fancy dinners, driving their fancy cars, wearing their fancy clothes, even though they just wiped you out and nothing is happening to them. That makes you mad, folks. And you've got a whole country of that right now. So the Chinese Communist Party has a major problem on its hands because it has a lot of people who are going to be very angry. And remember, they maintain their grip on power by suppressing any kind of dissent. So the government, they have to walk a very fine line in China, right? They cannot allow Evergrande to just blanket default and wipe out everybody, but they also can't bail out China Evergrande because it's the moral hazard question, right? When you incentivize moral hazard behavior, you get more moral hazardous behavior. Look at what happened with the U.S. banking system. But also, I don't think they can save their currency if they try to bail out the whole property market because this is way more systemic than just Evergrande. This is all over the place. So China has some real problems on its hand, and it's not going away anytime soon. So long story short, folks, we have not heard the last of this Evergrande story. It's going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse. The Chinese government is already kind of involved, but not really. They need to walk a fine line. It's not clear how much involvement the Chinese government is going to have in the resolution of this, but they are going to have to get involved, and it is going to spread, and we still don't know how exposed American and European banks and other financial institutions are to this situation. So you need to watch this Evergrande story. This is going to get bigger. This very well could be the defining moment that triggers the everything bubble, that finally pops this everything bubble. And I pointed out in an article the other day, the majority of the concrete, steel, aluminum, and copper in the world right now is going into China to finance this building of worthless crap that nobody needs. So this could wreak havoc with commodity markets, and we don't know what that's going to look like with the inflation story that's going on right now. So we need to watch this Evergrande story closely. Folks, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell. It really helps me out. It helps this channel to keep growing. In the meantime, live small and dream big.